Just ahead on American Black Journal, the Detroit Jazz Festival is celebrating its 36th anniversary. We're going to talk about this year's world-class lineup and the festival's impact on Detroit. Plus, we're going to get treated to an in-studio performance by a group of jazz musicians who are honoring the late Marcus Belgrave. American Black Journal starts right now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. The largest free jazz festival in the world turns 36 this year. The Detroit Jazz Festival consistently attracts tens of thousands of people over the Labor Day weekend, and it generates tens of millions of dollars for the city's economy. The festival has a diverse lineup of performers ranging from newcomers to jazz legends. This year's artist in residence is guitarist Pat Metheny, who's going to perform throughout the weekend. Here to tell us more about the Jazz Festival are Cornell Batie, who's the Executive Vice President and COO, Chris Collins, who's the Artistic Director, and Sharon Banks, who's Chair of the Board of Trustees. It's good to have you all back on American Black Journal for my favorite show of the year. Every year I'm circle this date on the calendar and say, this will be fun, because we get to talk about jazz, we get to talk about Detroit, but then we also get the live performance, which I just love. So tell me what's new this year at the festival. I feel like every year there's something that's surprising or different from years past.
Well, we're fortunate to have Chris, with his passion and his love for the festival, to always put together an amazing lineup.
Yes.
So I couldn't do the justice that Chris will do in explaining to you what's new.
Well, one of the things that's new is every year the momentum and energy at the festival, and with all the festival staff and administration, to put on something that's very special, guided by the mission to do not only jazz performance but jazz education, and continue to evolve the depth of what the definition of jazz is. At our festival this year, some of the excitement revolves around the idea of jazz being a storyteller, jazz capturing a culture and a community. And certainly in Detroit, that resonates with us on a very local level, because jazz is such an important part of who we are here.
Sure. So
in addition to some of the wonderful names you mentioned, Monty Alexander and Pat Metheny and all the cats, we have a couple of special programs that are going to challenge the audience in new ways. They tell stories. Opening night, Benny's Threads, which is a very interesting contemporary modern project that looks at the inspiration and artistic excellence of the great Benny Goodman, followed by one of our own, Kenny Garrett, playing with Pat Metheny and his trio. So we bring Detroit and the national side together a little bit. But then throughout the course of the festival, there are some projects, like for instance, on Saturday night we have a performance by Steve Turre and our own James Carter. It's a tribute to the great Rahsaan Roland Kirk. Then later that evening at the festival hotel at the Marriott, we are premiering a film called The Case of the Three-Sided Dream, a biography of Rahsaan Roland Kirk. So the artists will be there, and it'll be a full immersion into Rahsaan. The next night, Charlie Hayden's Liberation Orchestra is playing, and then in the evening at the festival again, we'll be showing his documentary, Rambling Boy, with the director, and so on and so forth. So there's this feeling of more depth into what jazz is, in addition to things you would expect. There's a lot of things you won't expect, and I'll tell you one very important project that I hear there might be some guest speakers on.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Few people know that Vivaldi wrote sonnets to his Four Seasons, this great classical violin solo with orchestra. We're recreating it with jazz clarinetist Eddie Daniels, a 23-piece string orchestra from Detroit here, and new narration written by Douglas Preston, but narrated by a couple of wonderful Detroiters who will tie in the music and the jazz and the classical side of this wonderful piece to the rebirth, the renaissance of our great city. So you can imagine we've even flipped the seasons around. So we're ending with spring, which I think we all believe we're in here.
Well, sort of, right? Listen to Chris talk about that. I mean, he sort of captures everything that I feel like this festival is about: the music, the art, and the city. I mean, it really is a distinctively Detroit event.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Gretchen wants great things to be in the city. And for her, it's about continuing to see this event thrive in the city. You know, it's about the music, it's about the city, it's about the people. You know, and I'm fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, you know, to work for someone such as Gretchen who has that passion. I mean, in addition to having Chris, as I mentioned, and us been fortunate, you know, to benefit from his passion and love. I mean, Sharon, as our trustee chair, I mean, she's done a great job in forging great partnerships for us that has enabled us to continue to drive and do what we're doing to cultivate partnerships that help us keep it funded. I mean, having the largest free jazz festival in the world.
You know, every year I ask that question about, you know, how stable the festival is. There have been times in history when we thought, oh, maybe we're not going to be able to keep doing this, but it seems like in the last couple of years, at least, it's found firmer footing, right?
Well, we have some key sponsors. I mean, Apsapure, I mean, their involvement with bringing in Pat Metheny and stepping up and really contributing in a big way. Carhartt, JP Morgan, Chase, DTE. I mean, what they've done with our greening program and stepping up and not only giving additional contributions to help us keep it free, but ensuring that we're doing something that's impactful for the city, you know, and, you know, the waste and all of that stuff, and just showing that we want the city to not only have a great festival, to show that we love the city and that we want to be about the city. And then we have some great foundations such as Herb, Kresge, National Endowment of the Arts. I mean, their funding help us not only do what we do for the festival, but it also helps us with our year-round initiatives that we do as far as education and things along that line.
Yeah, yeah. Sharon, I talked a little about those lean years where we were all very worried about what the festival's future might be. How did you guys turn that corner, though? How did the board lead through that to where we are now?
Well, we certainly have great leadership with Gretchen Valade, who is our benefactor, the philanthropist who decided this must be continuing in the city. Free for people.
That's the
she's
thing.
Always very adamant. And in those lean years, there were discussions on, do we charge? Do we have as many days? And without question, with the foundation that's been established by Gretchen through her philanthropy and the sponsors and partners that we have, and the members who join the festival every year that make their financial contributions, it all helps to keep it free. And so those sponsors help us bring others on board. And it just is in a place now that we're very proud to be able to say we have supporters for as little as $50 up to our $1 million plus sponsors every year. And we're very proud of that because there's a price point that begins free and then goes all the way up to allow people to be a part of what this is all about.
Sure. One of my favorite things about the festival is that it really just sort of takes over the Central Business District for those days in September. That feels different now than it did 5 or 10 years ago because of what's going on in Detroit. This sort of dovetails with the whatever you want to call it, the rebirth, the new energy that we have downtown, and the city just shines for those days.
Well, 5 years ago, we set out to raise the profile of the festival. And in doing that, we found some great partnerships like Quicken Loan, who does our opening night as far as giving a major contribution to that. And so it's really stepped up.
It's on their front porch, too, right?
Absolutely. And so, you know, building our profile and getting those more major partnerships to highlight our integration with the city and being up Woodward and in campus marches and helping the city come alive. I mean, you know, that definitely, you know, shows that it's really about the city.
Right.
That it's about the people. It's about that integration. And from that, I mean, you know, like I said, with Sharon's help and what Chris does with the performance piece, you know, we continue to bring on more partners, bring in more individual donors and supporters who are helping us keep it free.
Yeah. When you talk about other jazz festivals around the world, how many others are free the way this one is? I mean,
nothing to this level.
Yeah.
And you know, in addition to it being free, though, there is, like so many things out of Detroit, in Detroit's history and the current city, the Detroit Jazz Festival is something of a singularity in the Jazz Festival world. Not only is it focused on the art of jazz and the central development of that art form and respect to the legacy, looking forward to new artists, etc. We're also very much involved every year in commissioning new works, creating large works, small works that have impact around the world. So in addition to things like Pat Metheny is premiering his piece called Homage. It's the North American premiere. It's for strings, it's for big band, it's for media. It's all closing the festival on Monday night with a bunch of soloists. The idea is that it's something new that no one's ever heard before. Danilo Perez is premiering a commission that we asked him to write called the Detroit World Suite, and it brings together professional musicians from Panama with musicians and university musicians from the Detroit area to create this, not only a performance at the Detroit Jazz Festival, but something that's going to travel to Panama and premiere there in January. The idea being the Detroit Jazz Festival has something that at any ticket price you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else. And I think in that way we can be really proud of the fact that we're doing something that no one else is doing.
Yeah.
And I think we're very proud of the fact that we have certainly the footprint of what's happening downtown, Hart Plaza, Campus Martius, and everything in between. But we take it into the community. We take it into the neighborhoods. We're out and we're working with students and we're working with the schools and they're participating with us. So it is self-contained, but we're bringing so many people spread out across the city, and it's electric. People are really excited.
All right. We're going to continue that conversation about the Jazz Festival a little later, but coming up next, we're going to have a special performance by one of the bands at this year's festival. That's right after this look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African American life in Detroit. This week in 1964, John Conyers Jr. defeated Richard Austin in a Democratic Party primary contest for Congress. In 1972, staff at WCHB Radio went on strike to protest working conditions. And in 1975, the Jackson 5's Dancing Machine album was released. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African American Life in Detroit.
This summer, Detroit lost its reigning patriarch of jazz, trumpet legend Marcus Belgrave. A group of well-known musicians have come together to honor Belgrave at this year's Detroit Jazz Festival. We're really pleased to have them in our studio today to give us a little preview. Here is the Marcus Belgrave Jam Celebration House Band. What a great performance. If you see that, you're just getting a preview of what we're going to have all weekend over Labor Day. Our thanks to Robert Hurst on bass, Galen McKinney on drums, Michael Malice on piano, and Dwight Adams on trumpet. We'll be right back with more on the Detroit Jazz Festival. Stay right there. The Detroit Jazz Festival was recently voted the second best festival in North America by readers of Jazz Times magazine. I want to know what was first. And nearly 25% of the attendees come from out of state. I'm joined today by key members of the Jazz Festival's team, Cornell Batie, Chris Collins, and Sharon Banks. Chris, I want to talk to you a little bit about the music that we just heard. One of the things that always inspires me about Detroit is that heritage of jazz and culture that sort of is passed down from one generation to the next. The drummer in that particular combo was Galen McKinney, whose dad was a huge jazz legend here in Detroit, and that's sort of how we keep that alive, right? We just sort of keep passing it on through generations. It is, and you know, as you know, I grew up, you know, a musician in this town. It was my only thought was to just play around the world. So I had the great fortune of having time with some of these amazing cats. But it speaks, what you're talking about, this idea of mentoring people, this idea of passing on language and passing on experiences. I've always felt that's a powerful part of Detroit. Yeah. I feel it. We understand how important that is to not only maintaining an understanding of our history, but to move together forward. Yeah. And Marcus was a big part of that. Harold McKinney was a big part of that. Matt Michaels, Larry Nazaro, these guys that just invested themselves every day. And with that tune we just heard, here's this great house band with Rob and Galen and Michael. They're going to be doing this very special jam session on Friday night after hours. So it's like 11 till 1:30 up in the Marriott. Everyone's invited. And it's a jam session celebrating Marcus and celebrating the idea of the great mentors we've had and bringing together his family, his friends, all the musicians that were around him, play together and to have a social gathering that I think Marcus would have smiled on. Let's talk a little bit about Marcus Belgrave. The last time I saw Galen McKinney perform, he was supposed to be with her, and he'd already sort of fallen ill, and that turned out to be the prelude to his passing. Talk about the influence that he's had on Detroit jazz. I mean, I think a lot of times it gets lost that we have our own sort of distinctive history with this art form. We have our own sound. You think of a city like New Orleans, they have their sound. We have ours too, and Marcus was a huge part of forming that. He was. He shaped the Detroit vocabulary, and his musical experiences with Ray Charles in the early days, and it very much speaks to the Detroit musicians' experience of having R&B and blues and other musical forms interject into the jazz vocabulary. So certainly an homage to bebop and Bird and the avant-garde with this influence of blues and rhythm and blues and even pop musical forms. It all coalesces into what we call the Detroit sound. Yeah. And Marcus not only perpetuated that in the vocabulary he used, but his sound on his trumpet spoke to you the minute you heard it. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about the educational components of Jazz Fest. You mentioned in the first segment, Sharon, that you guys reach out beyond where the concerts actually take place to places in Detroit, in neighborhoods, but primarily focused on reaching young people. Reaching our young people, and there are several schools, and I believe 6 schools? 7 now. 7 schools now that we're in, where we are very structured with an education program for teaching, for mentoring, for providing outlets for these young people that, frankly, they wouldn't get anyplace else. Sure. And again, through the generosity of our philanthropist and founder in terms of the structure of the festival as we know it today, Gretchen Valade, it makes that all possible. Plus our sponsors and our foundations that come on board with us. And again, those that just drop $1 or $5 or 50 cents or whatever they can
helps us to go out into the community and bring those young people into
Well, and in terms of schools, I mean, you're talking about schools that in a lot of cases don't have their own music programs or can't afford their own music programs anymore. So that takes on an even added importance that you guys are able to do
Absolutely. And it gives them opportunities to play at the Jazz Festival, but Chris and his team find other avenues for them throughout the year. See, the Jazz Festival culminates on Labor Day weekend, but throughout the year, we're working with the young people to give them that exposure across the city.
Yeah. When I think about jazz and the future of jazz, sometimes I get a little worried that that young people, if you talk to them about music, they'll talk to you about hip hop, they'll talk to you about rap, they'll talk to you about popular music, and they don't get it quite yet. All of that stuff comes from this rich history.
Yeah, but you know, it's always fascinating to me. You know, I'm also the director of jazz at Wayne State University, and I see generation after generation, and they're growing, of jazz lovers, new generations of instrumentalists and vocalists willing to commit their life to this art and craft.
Yeah.
And when we talk about what we do in our Detroit Public Schools, the J.C. Hurd Jazz Week program, and that program spawns not only now an all-star group that will be at the festival of high school students that are the top of their class, but also an alumni group. Now that it's been functional for 8 years, we have these fabulous artists that are out there in the professional world coming back, and it propagates this mentor-disciple thing of once you progress in your life, you have a responsibility here to share that with those coming up behind you. And we've tried to engender that in all our educational programs and teach the upcoming youth that eventually you're going to be in this role, and we want to help you be prepared for that role as a mentor as well.
Right. So let's talk some nuts and bolts about the festival. How many stages this year? The normal
4 performance stages and the talk tent.
And okay, so
and you really have to count the jam session after hours.
Right,
Saturday,
right.
Sunday, and our film venues Saturday and Sunday night.
Okay, and all of it's free. Anyone can go to any of these things. If you had to pick one thing that you told people, don't miss this year, what would it be?
The whole festival.
The whole thing. Come to the whole thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and the effect on the city. You know, I mentioned in the open the amount of money this generates for the city, but it just really is the attention even that we get.
Oh, absolutely. The festival is about putting Detroit on a global cultural stage, you know, and position the city as the epicenter of all important events. And having that attention and having the Jazz Festival playing a role in that. I mean, as you said, with the jazz not being necessarily the art that you see in the younger generation, if we can continue to show that we are pushing that and we're having something that's very premier, and with the artists and the caliber of acts that we have that everyone can be exposed to, and then our year-round cultural events, along with our partnerships with DPS, I don't see a bigger way that you can help to push that movement and propel it to another level.
Yeah, really important sort of touchstone here in the city. It's hard to imagine Detroit without the festival, frankly. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, 36 years, that's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
Let's hope we all have 36 more, right? At least. All right. Before we say goodbye, American Black Journal and Detroit Public Television want to extend our condolences to the family of Louis Stokes. The politician and attorney passed away at the age of 90. A native of Cleveland, Mr. Stokes became Ohio's first black congressman. He served 15 terms and is being remembered as one of the most influential and respected members of the U.S. House of Representatives. Mr. Stokes is survived by his wife of 55 years and 3 children, including Detroit broadcast executive Chuck Stokes. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can hear our program on WDET 101.9 FM. Go to the Jazz Festival. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.